Captain Elias Ward had traveled through many star systems, but nothing compared to the silence of the Veil Nebula. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, drifted slowly through glowing dust and fractured starlight. This was no ordinary exploration mission. Command had given him a task that most considered impossible: to enter the hidden world of the Zytheran Empire and return alive. The Zytherans were ruled by a queen whose name was whispered in fear across the galaxy. No other race dared enter her domain. But Elias had accepted the mission without hesitation. Humans had a way of walking where others would not. For days, the human ship glided through empty space until strange signals pulled Elias toward a world cloaked in shadow. The planet appeared alive with energy storms swirling in its upper atmosphere. The records called it Zythera Prime, the heart of the Empire. No human had ever landed there before. Elias sat at the command chair, his jaw set, his eyes steady. He knew the risks. Dozens of ships had vanished here. Rumors claimed the Queen herself destroyed them with a thought. Still, something inside him whispered that this was not only about danger. There was a truth buried here, a truth the galaxy had avoided for centuries. As he entered orbit, the ship trembled. A deep voice echoed through his mind, though no speakers carried it. "Intruder, you dare approach the throne of the Queen?" Elias leaned back, unshaken. "This is Captain Elias, Ward of Earth. I've come to speak, not to fight." There was silence for a long moment. Then beams of light speared from the planet's surface, pulling his vessel down. Gravity surged, and the Horizon's Edge groaned as if crushed by an invisible fist. Elias gritted his teeth and held the controls. He did not resist. When the ship landed, the hatch hissed open on its own. Strange guards waited outside, towering beings with armored scales and burning yellow eyes. They did not speak but gestured for him to step out. Elias walked calmly, every step echoing on the black crystal floor of the alien landing site. The guards led him through winding corridors lit by shifting blue fire. The air was thick, heavy, almost alive. The deeper they went, the stronger Elias felt a presence pressing against his mind. It was not physical. It was the will of someone far greater than the guards. Finally, massive doors opened into a grand hall. At its center sat the alien queen. She was taller than any human, her form both regal and terrifying. Her skin shimmered with iridescent patterns like living metal. A crown of spiked crystal curved from her head, and her eyes glowed like twin stars. She did not rise from her throne. She did not need to. The weight of her gaze alone felt like a storm crashing down. The guard stepped back and left Elias alone before her. "You are the first human to stand in my presence," the Queen said, her voice carrying across the chamber without sound. It was inside him, echoing in his skull. "Do you know what fate awaits you?" Elias did not flinch. "If I feared fate, I would not have come." The Queen's expression shifted, not with amusement, but with annoyance. "Arrogant, reckless. That is what your kind is known for. You bring chaos wherever you go. Why are you here?" "I came for answers," Elias said simply. Her eyes narrowed, their glow intensifying. "Answers? Do you think I owe you anything, human?" "I think," Elias said calmly, "that the galaxy has lived too long in fear of you. But no one asks why. Why is it that your empire, powerful as it is, has never attacked Earth? You rule hundreds of systems, but when it comes to humanity, you keep your distance. Why?" The Queen's eyes flashed with sudden fury. She rose from her throne, her presence swelling like a tidal wave. The ground beneath Elias cracked. The air burned cold. Her voice thundered inside his skull, shaking him to the bone. "Why? Don't you leave me alone, human?" she yelled, her words sharp with anger and something else Elias could not yet name. The guards rushed back into the hall, but with a wave of her hand, she dismissed them. The chamber doors closed. She wanted to face him herself. Elias stood firm, though his body ached under her power. "Because fear is not enough for me. I want to know the truth." For a long time, the Queen stared at him. Her expression was unreadable. Then, she stepped down from her throne, her tall form moving with both grace and menace. She circled him, slowly, her energy brushing against him like fire against skin. "Your kind does not understand truth," she said softly now, though her voice still cut like a blade. "You understand conquest. You understand survival. You spread like fire through the stars, consuming everything in your path. That is why we avoid you. You are dangerous." Elias turned his head, following her as she moved. "Then why not destroy us? Why not strike Earth before it grows stronger?" Her steps faltered almost too slightly to notice, but Elias noticed. Her anger cracked, just for a second. "That," she said coldly, "is not your concern." Elias folded his arms. "It is. Because I think you fear us, not for our weapons, not for our armies, but for something else. Something you cannot control." The Queen stopped circling him. Her eyes blazed. "Careful, human. You walk on the edge of death." "Maybe," Elias admitted. "But you're still listening." Her jaw tightened. For the first time in centuries, perhaps, someone had dared to stand before her without trembling, without begging, without bowing. She had expected him to cower. Instead, he questioned her. That angered her more than she could say, but it also unsettled her. The chamber was silent except for the hum of alien energy coursing through the walls. Finally, she returned to her throne. She sat, her expression regaining its mask of power. "You will remain here until I decide what to do with you," she said. "Do not mistake my patience for mercy. You live only because I allow it." Elias nodded once. "Then I'll wait. I faced worse things than silence." The Queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She expected fear, not calm defiance. She turned her gaze away, though her mind stayed restless. When Elias was taken to a chamber that served as his prison, he sat on the floor and breathed deeply. He knew this was only the beginning. The Queen's anger was real, but beneath it, he had seen something else: hesitation. He had touched a wound she tried to hide from the galaxy, and he intended to find it, no matter how much she yelled for him to leave her alone. Far above, in the throne room, the Queen sat in silence. Her hands gripped the edges of her throne. For centuries, she had ruled through fear and unbroken command. Yet one human had walked into her world, stared into her eyes, and asked the question no one dared. "Why don't you leave me alone, human?" she whispered again. But this time it was not anger that filled her voice. It was something far more dangerous. The chamber Elias was given was more like a cage than a room. Its walls pulsed faintly with alien energy, and the floor seemed alive, shifting under his boots. A single slit in the wall allowed him to see the city beyond. Strange towers of crystal and light rose from the ground, and alien creatures moved in strict patterns as if every step of their lives was commanded. Elias studied it carefully. This was not freedom. This was control. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall and closed his eyes. The Queen wanted him to fear her. She wanted him to beg for release or cry out for mercy. But that was not who he was. He had come here with purpose. His heart beat steady. He would wait. Hours passed before the chamber door opened with a low hiss. 2 guards entered, their armored forms towering over him. One raised a clawed hand, gesturing for him to rise. Elias stood without protest. They led him through twisting corridors again, deeper into the heart of the palace. This time, however, he could feel the Queen's presence long before he saw her. Her will pressed against his mind, heavy like a storm cloud ready to break. The throne room was brighter than before. Streams of energy crackled across the walls. The Queen sat on her throne, her figure glowing faintly as though she were made of starlight. Her eyes locked onto him the moment he stepped inside. She dismissed the guards with a wave, leaving only the 2 of them once again. "You remain calm," she said. Her voice echoed inside his head as before, but this time it carried less anger, more curiosity. "Do you not understand where you are? You are in the heart of my empire. I could erase you with a thought." Elias tilted his head slightly, If you meant to erase me, I would already be gone. Her eyes narrowed. Do not test me, human. I'm not, Elias said simply. I'm only pointing out the truth. You've given me food. You've given me rest. You've allowed me to stand before you twice. You could have ended me in orbit, but you didn't. Why? Her fingers curled around the armrest of her throne. The room vibrated with her restrained fury. Do you wish to die so soon? Is that it? No, Elias answered. I want to live. But more than that, I want to understand. The queen rose slowly, her towering frame casting a shadow that swallowed him. She stepped down, each movement controlled and graceful. As she approached, the air around him grew heavy. His chest tightened, his body felt heavier, but his eyes never left hers. You are a strange creature, she said. Every other species kneels when they see me. Their minds break under my will. Yet you resist. Elias allowed a small smile. Humans have been resisting since the first day they walked the earth. It's what we do. Her eyes flared. She lifted a hand, and suddenly the gravity in the room increased tenfold. Elias dropped to his knees as the floor cracked beneath him. His bones screamed under the weight. Still, he did not cry out. He pressed one hand to the floor and struggled, forcing his body upright against the crushing force. Sweat poured down his face, but he stood. The queen's expression shifted again. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered across her features. She released the pressure and the weight lifted. Elias straightened, breathing heavily but unbroken. You should be broken, she said softly, almost to herself. No other has endured this. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow. You think strength is only about power, but strength also comes from refusing to fall, even when the world is against you. Her gaze locked onto him, sharp as a blade. Do you speak for yourself, or for all your kind? For all of us, Elias said without hesitation. That is why you fear us, not because of what we build, but because of what we refuse to give up. The queen turned away sharply, walking back toward her throne. Her robe of living metal trailed behind her, shimmering in the light. She sat again, her hands clasped tightly. You think you know me, she said, her voice carrying a new edge. You think you understand my choices. You do not. My empire is not held by kindness or weakness. It is held by fear. Fear is what keeps my people loyal. Fear is what keeps enemies away. Then why doesn't fear work on humans? Elias asked. Her eyes met his again, burning brighter than before. For a long moment she did not answer. Finally she spoke, but her voice was lower now, almost like a whisper in his mind. Because you do not fear death as others do. That is your curse. That is why you must be left alone. Elias frowned slightly. Is that why you yelled at me? Because you don't want humans near you, or because you don't want humans near you? The chamber pulsed with energy as her anger flared. Silence! She roared, her voice crashing against him like thunder. The walls shook, the air split, and for a moment it felt as though the palace itself might collapse. But Elias did not. Step back. He stood, his jaw firm, his eyes steady. You can try to silence me, he said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. But the truth doesn't vanish because you don't want to hear it. The queen's fury surged again. She stretched out her hand and a wave of psychic fire struck him. His vision blurred, pain seared through his body, but still he remained on his feet. His voice cut through the storm. Why don't you just end me? He demanded. You have the power. You've shown it. If you truly hate me, if you truly hate humans, then do it now. Crush me, burn me, erase me. Her attack faltered. The psychic fire flickered, then vanished. Elias's chest heaved as he stood there, shaking but alive. The queen lowered her hand slowly. Her breathing was heavier than before, though she hid it well. She leaned back in her throne, her expression hard to read. You do not understand. The danger of your words. You press against places you should not. You force me to. She stopped herself and turned away, her eyes closing. Elias said nothing. He let the silence hang in the air. The queen sat in stillness for a long time, her chest rising and falling slowly. Finally, she opened her eyes and looked at him again. You will remain here longer. I wish to study you. Elias raised an eyebrow. Study me? Yes, she said firmly, regaining her command. You will answer my questions. You will tell me about your kind. You will show me why you are as unbroken as you claim. And if I refuse? Elias asked. Her eyes burned. Then you will break. Eventually everything breaks. Elias shook his head. Not humans. Not me. The queen's lips tightened, but she said nothing more. She gestured, and the doors opened. The guards entered again and led Elias back to his chamber. As he walked, Elias thought about what had happened. She had tried to crush him with power, but each time she stopped short of killing him. Each time, she let him live. That meant something. It meant she was not as unshakable as she pretended. Back on her throne, the queen sat in silence. Her hands trembled faintly, though no one was there to see. She clenched her fists until the tremble stopped. Why don't you leave me alone? Human? She whispered again, but this time her voice carried not only anger. It carried confusion, and perhaps, hidden deep beneath, a trace of fear. Elias did not know how many days passed inside the palace of the alien queen. There were no sunrises, no sunsets, only the endless glow of crystal towers and the steady hum of alien energy flowing through the walls. His chamber never changed, but each day the guards would arrive and take him to the throne room. Each time he faced her again. At first she questioned him as though he were a prisoner. She asked about humanity's ships, its weapons, its colonies. Elias answered, but not in the way she wanted. Instead of numbers and tactics, he told her stories. He spoke of explorers who crossed oceans without knowing what lay ahead. He spoke of farmers who tilled soil in storms because their families needed food. He spoke of soldiers who stood against enemies larger and stronger, not because they believed they would win, but because giving up was not an option. The queen listened in silence. Sometimes her eyes narrowed in frustration, as though she wanted to snap at him for wasting her time. Other times her expression softened for only a heartbeat before she hid it again. She tried to act as though she was in control, but Elias could see it. Every story he told pulled at something deep inside her. On the 7th time he was brought before her, the queen did not sit on her throne. She stood near the great window that overlooked her capital. The city stretched far into the distance, a landscape of dark towers glowing with blue veins of energy. The streets below moved in perfect order, no voices raised, no laughter heard. Elias entered and stopped a few steps behind her. The guards left them alone again. You speak of freedom as though it is a gift, she said, her voice quieter than usual. But freedom is chaos. Freedom breeds betrayal. Do you know how many times my throne has been threatened by those who claimed they wanted choice? Do you know how many wars were born from such chaos? Elias looked past her at the city. Maybe, but freedom also gives people something to fight for, something worth living for. The queen turned her head slightly. You think my people do not live? You think they do not fight? They live in fear, Elias said firmly. I saw it in the streets. Every step they take is because they're afraid of you. They don't laugh. They don't sing. They don't dream. They survive. But survival isn't the same as living. Her jaw tightened. She turned back to the window, her hand resting against the cold crystal. I was not always their queen, she said at last. Her voice carried a weight Elias had not heard before. When I was chosen, I was told I would no longer belong to myself. I was told I must be the voice of the empire, the hand of its will, the symbol of its power. My life ended the day I accepted the crown. Elias studied her carefully. For the first time she spoke not as a ruler but as a prisoner. Is that why you hate humans? He asked softly. Because we remind you of what you lost? The queen spun toward him, her eyes blazing. I do not hate you, she yelled, her voice filling the chamber. I hate what you bring. I hate that you walk into my world with your stories and your defiance. I hate that you remind me of—" She stopped herself, her fists clenching at her sides. "Of what?" Elias pressed gently. Her shoulders rose and fell with heavy breaths. Finally, she said in a voice so low it was almost a whisper, "Of what I once wanted." Elias took a slow step forward. "And what was that?" The queen turned her gaze away. "Choice. A life not bound by the throne. But that life was taken from me. Now I rule because I must. If I show weakness, my people will tear each other apart. The generals will rise, the empire will collapse, and millions will die. I carry this burden so they do not destroy themselves." For the first time, Elias saw the truth behind her fury. She was not only feared by her people, she was chained by them. Her throne was not a crown of power, but a prison of responsibility. "You hide behind anger," Elias said softly, "because it's the only shield you have left." Her eyes snapped back to him. "And what would you have me do, human? Abandon them? Abandon everything I have held together for centuries?" "No," Elias said, "but you don't have to do it alone." Her laughter cut through the air, sharp and bitter. "Alone is the only way a queen can rule." "Not for humans," Elias said. "When we face something bigger than ourselves, we stand together. We hold each other up. That's why we survive when we shouldn't. That's why even you—" He stopped himself, but the queen heard the words he left unsaid. Her eyes narrowed. "Finish it." Elias hesitated, then said, "That's why even you couldn't bring yourself to kill me." The queen's face darkened with fury. She stepped forward, her power flaring again. The ground trembled, the walls pulsed, and for a moment Elias thought she would strike him down. But instead, she froze, her hands shaking at her sides. "Why? Don't you leave me alone, human?" she shouted, her voice breaking with anger and something else. "Why do you keep tearing open wounds that should have healed long ago?" Elias stood firm. "Because they never healed. You buried them, and if you bury pain long enough, it rots everything around it." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She turned away again, her cloak of light shifting with her movements. She stood, in silence for a long time, staring out over the city as though she could escape the weight pressing on her shoulders. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "You do not understand what it means to be me, to carry the weight of billions, to silence every weakness, to cut away every piece of yourself until only the throne remains." "Maybe I don't," Elias admitted. "But I do know what it means to carry pain alone, and I know it doesn't work forever." The queen closed her eyes. She remembered her youth before the throne, a time when she had laughed with others of her kind, when she had dreamed of traveling the stars not as a ruler, but as a wanderer. Those dreams had been taken from her, locked away behind the crown. And now a single human dared to remind her of them. When she opened her eyes again, she turned to Elias, her expression unreadable. "You should hate me. I have enslaved worlds, broken empires, erased species. Yet you stand here and speak to me as though I am worthy of your pity." "I don't pity you," Elias said firmly. "I see you." For a moment, the chamber was silent. The queen's eyes searched his as though she was trying to find the trick, the lie, but she found none. His gaze was steady, unflinching, honest. She turned away quickly, her cloak sweeping behind her. "Enough for today," she said, her voice sharp again, though weaker than before. She called for the guards. They returned and led Elias back to his chamber. When the doors closed behind him, Elias sat against the wall and let out a long breath. He had seen it now clearly. The queen's anger was not only a weapon against her enemies, it was armor against her own loneliness. Back in the throne room, the queen sat heavily in her seat. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the steady thrum of her heart. "Why don't you leave me alone, human?" she whispered once more. But now she realized the question was not only about anger, it was about fear. Fear that she could no longer hide the truth. Fear that the one creature she had sworn to keep away might be the only one who truly understood her. The palace of the queen was never quiet. Energy hummed through the walls, the air shimmered faintly with power, and the endless glow of alien crystal filled every corner. Yet Elias felt something had changed. Each day he was brought before the queen, and each day her voice carried less fury and more weight. She still threatened him, still tried to show her strength, but her words no longer struck with the same certainty. Beneath her anger, Elias could hear doubt. That doubt became more visible when the queen summoned him late in the cycle. The throne room was darker than usual, the energy lights dimmed. She stood away from her throne, her cloak of living metal, coiled behind her like a shadow. "You are stubborn," she said, her eyes fixed on him. "No matter what I do, you refuse to bow. You refuse to break. Do you not know that one day, your defiance will cost you your life?" Elias gave a small shrug. "If I die standing, I'd still rather that than live on my knees." Her jaw tightened. She turned away, pacing slowly across the chamber. "You humans, you never know when to stop." "And you," Elias said, "never let yourself start." Her head snapped toward him, eyes blazing, but before she could speak, the great doors of the chamber slammed open. Several figures entered, generals, in jagged armor, their faces hard with resolve. They bowed only slightly before speaking. "My queen," one said, his voice low but steady, "forgive our intrusion. We must speak." The queen straightened, her power flaring just enough to remind them of who she was. "You dare enter without command? Speak quickly before I erase you." The general did not flinch. His eyes flickered, briefly toward Elias before returning to her. "It is the human. His presence weakens you. The court whispers. The armies grow restless. They say you are distracted." Elias stayed silent, but he felt the tension sharpen in the air. "You question me?" the queen demanded. "We question your judgment," the general said boldly. "You allow the human to live when you should have destroyed him. Our enemies are watching. If they sense weakness, they will strike. Already some of your commanders gather support for a replacement." The queen's eyes blazed. "Replacement?" "Yes," the general said firmly. "If you cannot end the human, then perhaps another should rule in your place." Elias saw her hand tremble. For all her power, he knew these words struck deeper than any blade. She had ruled for centuries, holding her empire together with fear and strength. But now cracks were forming. "Leave us," she commanded, her voice cold as ice. The generals bowed again, though their movements lacked true loyalty. They turned and left the chamber. The doors closed with a heavy thud, leaving only Elias and the queen again. For a long moment she stood in silence. Her shoulders were tense, her fists clenched at her sides. Elias watched her carefully. "They mean to overthrow you," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, her voice sharp but heavy. "It was always only a matter of time. Power breeds envy. They see hesitation where there is only strategy. They see weakness where there is only restraint." "They see you changing," Elias said, "and that scares them." Her head turned toward him. Her eyes burned, but there was no denial in them. Instead, she whispered, "Why don't you leave me alone, human? If you had never come, this would not be happening." Elias shook his head. "No, this would have happened anyway. They've waited for a chance. I'm just the excuse. But you don't have to face it alone." She let out a bitter laugh. "Alone is the only way I know." "Then it's time to learn something new," Elias said firmly. Before she could respond, the walls of the palace shook. A distant explosion echoed through the corridors. Shouts filled the air. The betrayal had begun. The queen's eyes flared with fury. She turned toward the doors. "They dare raise their hands against me." Elias stepped closer. "Then let me stand with you." She spun on him. "You would fight for me? Even after all I've done? Even after I tried to break you?" Elias nodded without hesitation. "Because that's what humans do. We stand with those who need us even when they push us away." Her expression flickered. Anger, confusion, then something softer. She turned away quickly, hiding it behind her cloak. "Do not slow me down, human," she said, but her voice lacked its usual edge. The throne room doors burst open. Armored soldiers stormed in, weapons glowing with strange fire. The queen raised her hand and a wave of energy ripped through them, hurling bodies across the chamber. Elias grabbed a weapon from a fallen soldier, its weight strange but manageable. He moved beside her, blocking strikes and returning blows. The battle spilled into the palace corridors. Loyal guards clashed with traitors, the walls lit with bursts of alien power. The queen fought like a storm, her presence crushing enemies before they could reach her. Yet Elias noticed something. She no longer fought alone. She moved with him at her side, their actions strangely balanced. Where her power was overwhelming but broad, his movements were sharp and precise, striking where she left openings. At one point, a soldier lunged toward her back. Elias threw himself between them, blocking the strike with the alien weapon. The queen turned, eyes widening for a fraction of a second as she saw him protect her. "Why?" she demanded as she destroyed the attacker with a flick of her hand. "Because I don't leave people behind," Elias shouted back. Her face tightened, but she said nothing more. They fought their way to the heart of the palace where the traitorous generals had gathered their forces. The great hall was filled with soldiers, banners torn from the walls, the air thick with smoke and sparks. The leading general stepped forward, his eyes blazing with ambition. "Your reign ends today, Queen," he declared. "The empire deserves a ruler unbroken by weakness. You have let a human twist you into doubt. You are no longer fit to lead." The queen's power flared, shaking the ground. "You dare call me weak?" she thundered. "I am the empire." The battle began. Soldiers surged forward. The queen unleashed waves of psychic fire tearing through enemy lines. Elias moved through the chaos, striking down attackers, covering her blind spots. For every enemy that slipped past her power, Elias was there to stop them. The fight lasted, long and brutal. The palace floor cracked under the weight of their clash. At last, only the general remained, standing defiant before the queen. His armor burned, his weapon shattered, but his eyes still burned with hatred. "You've already lost," he spat. "The empire will never follow a queen who hesitates." Queen stepped forward, her presence overwhelming. "I do not hesitate," she said coldly. "I choose." Her hand lifted and the general was crushed under her will, falling lifeless to the floor. Silence filled the hall. The surviving soldiers dropped their weapons, bowing in submission. The rebellion was ended. The queen stood in the center of the hall, her cloak torn, her eyes glowing with fierce light. Elias stepped beside her, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. She looked at him for a long moment. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. "You fought with me. You protected me, even when I told you to leave me alone." Elias gave a small, tired smile. "That's what humans do. We don't walk away when it matters." Her eyes softened, though only slightly. She turned away, her cloak wrapping around her. "You are a fool," she said, "but perhaps a necessary one." Together, they walked back through the ruined palace. The queen had crushed the rebellion, but something had changed forever. She had fought not as a solitary ruler, but with a human at her side. And for the first time in centuries, she wondered what it might mean to share the burden she carried. The aftermath of the rebellion left the palace scarred but standing. Crystal towers glowed faintly with repaired energy lines, and corridors that once trembled with power now felt quieter, though no less commanding. The queen sat upon her throne, once more, but something had shifted in her posture. She no longer radiated the rigid, untouchable presence that had dominated her empire for centuries. She had faced the threat of betrayal and survived not alone, but with a human at her side. Elias stood near the throne, his arms crossed, surveying the chamber. For days he had expected the queen to dismiss him or demand he leave. Instead, she observed him quietly, her expression unreadable. though her eyes betrayed an emotion she did not name. "You fought well," she said finally, her voice firm but softer than before. "Even when I tried to drive you away." Elias shrugged. "I told you, humans don't leave those who need help." She studied him, her head tilted slightly. "You are dangerous, you know that?" He met her gaze calmly. "Maybe, but so are you." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Outside the palace, her people moved through the streets with renewed discipline. Soldiers who had once raised weapons against her now bowed in genuine respect. The queen's power was absolute, yet she no longer seemed entirely alone. "You have changed things," she said, her voice quiet now. "Not the rebellion alone, not the battle, but you, your presence." Elias looked down briefly. "I didn't do anything you couldn't do yourself. I just reminded you humans have a way of standing by each other." Her eyes narrowed and she leaned forward slightly. "Why? Why do you do this? Why do you risk yourself, speak to me as if I were equal to you, when any other would have obeyed fear?" "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We don't follow power blindly, we follow what's right. And right now, standing with you was the right thing." For the first time, the queen's lips curved. Not in amusement, not in anger, but in something softer, almost fragile. She leaned back, her eyes gazing at the crystal ceiling. "I have ruled for centuries," she said softly. "Never has anyone questioned me and survived. Never has anyone stayed with me when I demanded they leave. And yet you stand." Elias took a small step closer. "Because I knew you didn't want me to. You wanted to push me away, but you also didn't want to be alone." Her body stiffened for a moment as though he had struck a nerve. "You presume much," she said coldly, but there was no bite in her tone. "Am I wrong?" he asked gently. Her eyes glimmered with something she had not felt in centuries. Vulnerability, fear, a quiet longing she could not name. She looked away, forcing herself back into the mask of the queen. "Perhaps," she said. "But what difference does it make?" "Now?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because now you see that you don't have to carry it all alone." Outside the palace, her empire stirred. News of the rebellion's end spread quickly. The soldiers and citizens who had feared the queen's anger began to whisper, unsure of how to respond. They expected vengeance. They expected terror. But none came. Instead, they saw her standing strong, victorious, yet different. She had survived the chaos with a human beside her, and in doing so, she had changed. In the following days, the queen summoned Elias to her private chambers, a space he had not entered before. It was filled with light, gentle and golden, unlike the harsh glow of the throne room. Crystals reflected the colors of the nebula beyond, and strange plants hummed quietly with energy. For the first time, Elias saw her in a place not dominated by her throne, not defined by the weight of empire. "You see this place," she said, motioning to the room. "Few have been allowed here. Fewer still have stood here without trembling." Elias nodded. "It's beautiful." "Beauty," she said softly, "is dangerous. It reminds us of what we could have, what we lost, what we might never reach. That is why I guard it. That is why I guard myself." "You don't have to guard yourself from me," Elias said. "I'm not here to take anything. I'm here to help, if you let me." She studied him, her eyes reflecting the swirling nebula outside the window. "Why? Why do you care? Why do you persist when everything in me tells you to leave?" "Because humans care," he said simply. "We don't abandon those who need us, even when they push us away, even when they yell at us, even when they demand we leave. We stay." The queen's lips pressed together. Her hand trembled slightly as she rested it on the arm of the chair. You are unlike any human I have ever imagined, and yet you are exactly as they are meant to be." Elias smiled faintly. Then you understand now why Earth is left alone, why your empire has never struck. It is not only our strength you fear, it is our heart. For a long time the queen said nothing. Her eyes drifted to the sky beyond the window. She thought of centuries of solitude, of decisions made out of duty, of moments of fear she had buried behind the throne. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel a fraction of what she had lost. "You have changed me," she said at last, her voice quiet. "Perhaps more than you realize." "And you have changed yourself," Elias said. "You let someone stand beside you. You let someone fight with you, instead of leaving everything to fear and power." Her lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "Do not presume I am grateful," she said softly, though the hardness had faded from her voice. "I am cautious, always cautious. But perhaps I will allow this to continue." Elias nodded. "That's all I ask. Not for friendship, not for trust. Just allow yourself to see what it means to stand together, even once." The queen's eyes held his gaze for a long moment. The power she wielded could crush worlds, but now it felt different, tempered by something she had forgotten: hope. She had fought centuries alone, but now she realized strength was not only power. Strength was also the choice to stand with another. Days turned into weeks. The queen ruled her empire as before, but her demeanor changed subtly. She still commanded respect, still inspired fear, but she listened more, observed more, and in quiet moments allowed herself to reflect. Elias remained at her side, not as a subject, not as a servant, but as someone she allowed near her presence. Their alliance became known to the empire. Soldiers who had once plotted against her now saw a different path, one where strength was tempered with loyalty, where power was not the only measure of leadership. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the queen finally spoke in a voice so quiet it was almost lost to the wind. "I asked you to leave me alone, human. You did not, and I—" She paused, searching for words she had not allowed herself in centuries. "I am not certain what I feel now." Elias looked at her calmly. "You feel something you've not allowed yourself to feel in a long time. Relief, trust, perhaps even hope." She turned fully to him, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Hope is dangerous," she said softly. "It can lead to mistakes, to betrayal, to failure. And so can fear," Elias replied. "But one can also choose to live with hope, even in a galaxy that demands only fear and obedience." The queen's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, one that did not hide power or authority, but something more human. You are infuriating, human, always speaking of things I do not want to hear, of truths I do not want to see. And yet," Elias said with a faint grin, "here I am, still speaking, still standing, still human." For the first time in centuries, the queen allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The empire would continue, wars might come, rebellions might rise, but now she knew something important. Strength alone did not define a ruler. Loyalty, courage, and the willingness to stand with another, even a human, were equally powerful. The galaxy had feared her for centuries, and rightfully so. But now she understood that humans were not only the galaxy's challengers, they were also its teachers. They could show courage where none seemed possible, inspire trust where it had long been abandoned, and stand beside those who had been alone too long. She looked at Elias once more. "Perhaps you are not the enemy I imagined. Perhaps you are something far more dangerous." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" "Yes," she said softly, "because you remind me that even a queen can choose differently. Even a ruler can stand with someone instead of above them." Elias smiled. "And even humans can teach that to a queen." The night stretched over the city. Stars reflected, In the crystal towers, the hum of energy quieted into a calm rhythm, and two beings, one human, one alien, stood together, watching the galaxy. The Queen had survived, the rebellion had ended, and a bond had formed that neither power nor fear could break. And in that moment, the galaxy would never see the alien queen the same way again, nor would it see humans as simple beings of flesh and steel. They were something more. They were resilience, loyalty, and heart-made flesh. And even in the farthest reaches of space, that truth could not be ignored. The Queen finally spoke one last time that night, her voice quiet but firm, carrying both authority and something else entirely. "You did not leave me alone, human, and perhaps I am grateful." Elias stood beside her, calm and steady, knowing that some bonds were forged not by choice, but by courage and trust. The galaxy had witnessed the impossible. A human had entered the heart of the Zitharan Empire, faced its most powerful ruler, and left not only alive, but changed the course of an empire. And the Queen, once feared above all, now understood that sometimes strength was not only in power, but in the willingness to stand beside another even